Good afternoon. Again, purely this time because of a lack of time on my part, this one is going to be, I'm going to try and bring this over without causing too much of a noise. This one's going to be a kind of, more stripped down version of the videos. I apologise. Yeah, just don't have the time. It's the reality. So what I will do is today talk through essentially some principles of preventing abuse that were laid out by the basically the standards for, what were they called again? Yeah, so I'm going to go through the last bit of content. It's basically some principles for preventing abuse from the standards for, I'm going to put it here because I keep forgetting every time I go to look for what it stands for. For some reason it just slips out of my mind, but it's the SCIE. And they basically laid out, they're essentially a kind of government-funded organisation, although they do have some independence. But they laid out 6 principles that they recommend that care and health centres should follow when they are actually trying to prevent the abuse of specifically adults. But much of it can also be applied to children as well. So really they lay out these 6 principles, and the first is empowerment, and this is a very important one because it's a key element of the spec. So it's a very important one to include. But essentially the commissioners of the SCIE will recommend that we actually empower service users to make as many of the key decisions regarding their care as possible. This is because it keeps them as informed elements of the care setting. It kind of helps them get a voice in the running of the setting. Because the trouble is, when you think of a health and care setting, the residents, the imbalance of power is there. So the more that you can address that and allow the residents to have some say over the day-to-day running of their lives, the more that you can, empower them to actually become really kind of self-assertive individuals within the setting. It makes them more included in the decisions. It makes them more willing to speak out about any potential threats or concerns that they have. So actually, you want to support residents as much as you can in making their own decisions. Make them feel like really empowered individuals that feel involved in decisions about how care and treatment is provided in the residency at your organisation. But also you want to kind of provide personalised services that promote choice and control for the service user. Don't make them feel that they are at your mercy of all your decisions. Make them feel like you are letting them make their own decisions. And that kind of makes them feel more equal to their care workers, which makes it a far more healthy setting to prevent some of the abuses that sadly we've discussed already. The second principle is protection. Now this is simply just the best ways to protect against any potential abuse. And again, it comes back once more to this thing that we've already talked about, which is the multi-agency partnership. I've gone through the benefits of that 2-3 times in different videos, so I'm not going to be spending much time on it. But really, they suggest that multi-agency framework is the best way to protect people from abuse and harm. But also they make a couple of other suggestions. So secondly, they say that you should use a best interests process to protect people who maybe lack the capacity to make decisions for themselves. So you make sure that people are checking whether decisions are made in the best interest of people who maybe can't make their own decisions. So you make sure that you take account and record all the person's past wishes, feelings, values, the views of people that have known that person. So you make sure that even when the person can't decide for themselves, you do your best to make decisions that they would have done if they were able to. And there's got to be processes within the organisation to make sure that that kind of thing is taking place. And finally, they also suggest access to advocacy, again, to make sure that if that person cannot speak for themselves for whatever reason, they have someone that's there and willing to speak on their behalf. Principle 3 is essentially prevention. is better than responding. You should emphasize that prevention of abuse is far more preferable to, you know, responding once it's happened. So what they suggest is that they kind of use the governance framework of the local safeguarding board, the adult safeguarding board, all of that sort of thing, to gain as much intelligence as they can about potential threats in the area. So you want to kind of be vigilant for the potential of abuse. You also want to make sure that you're using in any investigations about abuse to inform prevention of further abuse. What went wrong this time round that maybe led to abuse taking place that you can prevent further on. And then you want to make sure that you're feeding back that information to the local safeguarding board so that they can help prevent that in other settings as well. So you really want to share the best practice and the best prevention across as many settings as you can. Kind of really work together on it. Fourthly, we have the proportionate response. I'm just checking the time because my camera cuts out after 10 minutes for some reason. So what they suggest is actually you should take a proportionate response to any reports of abuse. You don't want to kind of, basically, if someone kind of raises a minor concern, that you come down on it, you know, with like the full army of your response, because it would then, from the point of view, cause more harm than good. You don't want to lead to neglect of service users because staff, for example, are consistently on edge and kind of walking on eggshells all the time. It's far better for good quality care that responses are proportionate. A serious accusation demands a serious response, but a more minor accusation should, you know, be faced proportionately. It doesn't mean to take it, you know, to not take it seriously, but you shouldn't, you know, do more harm than good in your response to the concern or the complaint. And there should be clarity for all service users from the SCIE and the CQC and all of the relevant bodies that look after this, what is and what is not appropriate to investigate. Kind of, you know, setting that minimum standard again, just like we were talking about with the legislation last lesson even, potentially. So, the fifth principle is partnership. And again, we keep coming back to this multi-agency approach, and this is basically that, but repackaged. You basically want to make sure that you're working with everyone involved in the care setting to make sure that they're all, that services are constantly improving, that we are getting as much intelligence as we can about where there's gaps in provision or concerns about the practice being taking place, or the any threats to the safeguards of the organisation. So that means including the community, it means including carers, it means including residents, it means including the staff, it means everyone needs to be in working in partnership to tackle abuse. It's not something that can be done on its own. And finally, and again, I'm sorry I'm racing through this, it's just that for some reason my camera can't record for longer than 10 minutes without shutting down, so I'm just watching the timer. Yeah, anyway, so basically there's accountability. That is the sixth principle. Accountability means that you are accountable to someone. You have to explain to someone else what you did and why. And that means that everyone within a care setting and within the organisations that are responsible for care need to be responsible and accountable to another person. So all local partners in the care settings, etc., need to be accountable to things like the Adult Safeguarding Board. All care settings need to be accountable to the CQC. If you don't have accountability, then, you know, essentially if someone is doing something that's unsatisfactory, then that will never be called out on. So you really want to make sure that everyone is aware of their roles, aware of their responsibilities, and they're aware who they are accountable to, so that if any abuse takes place, it has to, you know, be passed on to the relevant organisation, and that everyone is checking up on everyone else. Everyone is accountable. You know, no one's able to just kind of go rogue and, you know, go without people checking up on them. The CQC goes to inspect its care settings all the time to make sure that the proper care is taking place. That's an example of accountability at work.